gets mispronounced a lot, but Neon Veon, that's kind of what my nickname was.
All right, perfect. And you and Aaron had a chance to chat briefly?
Yeah, briefly.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, cool. Yeah, this is Aaron, my trusty podcast host. You know that they're having teams vital, of course. Couldn't do it without him. So glad you guys got acquainted before we started. Let's get right into it, man. First of all, thank you for joining us today. Never had a NFL live content creator. We're going to talk a lot about that. You have your media company, Orchard 8. You have your podcast. You're screaming versatility. Where's the best place to begin? I'm going to put it on you because I think the theme of today is probably going to be not necessarily having one set identity as a creator. We talk a lot about having our eggs in a lot of different baskets, being more than just a photographer. Of course, this is the photographer mindset, but we advocate for being hybrid creators, for lack of a better term. So where do you think is the best place to start with who you are and what you do and kind of how you got into what you're doing now with all the enterprises you have on the go?
Yeah, I love that. I'd say the best place to start, I think I'll take you through kind of like halfway point of college to the end. And that's where the journey started for me. And then that took me ultimately to the NFL gig and then my own business as well.
And how old are you, just to start, for reference?
24 years old.
Wow. Awesome. Okay, cool. I swear I won't interrupt too many times.
Oh, no, you're good. Yeah. So, I mean, about halfway through college, I'd been like flying drones for fun, really, not really for creative purposes. Hadn't had like social media or anything outside of like I had an Instagram just to like follow friends and a Snapchat to communicate or whatever, but hadn't been like doing any content. So I had this drone, started to get some cool stuff. So this was around like 2018, 2019. And just randomly was like, I'm going to post this clip. It was like a video of a golf course the one summer. So I posted it and got like a little bit of traction from that. Had some friends reach out like, oh, this is so sweet. This is sick. So that kind of like inspired me to double down a little bit on it and started to watch more YouTube videos from creators like Rory Kramer and Matt Como, Sam Colder, a lot of those type of video creators. And really thought what they were doing was awesome. I really wanted to do that. So it kind of lit the fire. At the time, I was a computer science major at Westminster College, which is a small school, about 1,000 students here in PA. And so I hadn't really been studying anything creative wise. So started to do more of the drone stuff, posted more on social media. Spring of my junior year comes around and had a class with this kid named Connor Wilson. And at the time he was working for the football team on campus and his job was to fly the drone above their practices so they could get like the Madden view of the field for game film purposes and all that stuff. And he was about to graduate and they needed somebody to take his spot. So he just was like, hey man, like I know you're interested or you're into drones and I've seen some of your work. Would it be something you'd be interested or just come out and check out what I do? And I was like, sure. So I went out there and saw what he did and thought it was sweet. So I was like, well, I'll get like a little stipend to fly drones, like pretty cool. So I went and took that job. The following August, we went back for my senior year. Or sorry, that might have been my spring of my sophomore year is whenever I took the job. Went back my junior year, and that's when I actually started. So went through camp, did all that stuff with flying the drone. Really was nothing creative about it other than just push and record and all that. But on game days, we couldn't use the drone. It was just not allowed. So I had more time to like do whatever. And I had started to see some other creators that were part of like the NFL program, the LCC program, creating these cool videos. And a lot of like the college teams started to have like really creative videographers and everything. I was like, I kind of want to do that. So I didn't have a handheld camera or anything yet. Did some research and learned about the Panasonic GH5, and that seemed like a good bet just because you were able to do like 60 frames per second and 120 frames per second for slow motion. I was like,
Mhm.
it's be a good investment. So went the day of the first game to this camera store in Youngstown and bought this camera, spent like a good chunk of the money I made over the summer. Um, and then kind of figured it out for that first game. I was only able to film warm-ups that first game. But after the game, I made a little edit, posted it, and went crazy because for a school like that, 1,000 students, D3, like they didn't have any of that. We didn't have any of that type of coverage. It just wasn't in the budget. So the students loved it. The coaches loved it. Coaches were like, we want you to do that for every game going forward. So then that gave me like the platform to practice and get better and really like learn the ropes of how to use this camera. So did it the whole rest of the year. Wrapped it up. They went and won an ECAC championship bowl game. And I was like, wow, that was really cool. Other people on campus started noticing. I started doing different other sports, lacrosse, basketball, sorority recruitment videos,
No kidding,
all
huh?
that type of stuff. So then springtime rolls around, it's 2020. And we go on spring break, but we never come back. So that kind of like put a little pause on it because it was like, now there's nothing to do. But I'd still like done a couple little paid gigs there that winter right before that. Nothing crazy. I was making like $25 for some of these things. But it was a start. So all that time during the COVID lockdown, I was like, how do I like continue to monetize this or like make it better? Because like this is what I want to do. I don't want to do computer science. I just couldn't see myself doing that. So 2020, I was like, I'm gonna form an LLC to house this under, just so it's a little bit more official for like
Mhm.
B2B, business to business relationships, stuff like that, versus just me like as Josh Veon, the freelancer. So I kind of did the paperwork, got all that stuff squared away. I built the website all during the lockdowns, and that was kind of it for that. Like I kind of just set it up, and then it was starting to get back to normal. I worked at a golf course at the time as like my summer job. So I went back to the golf course, didn't do too many creative things during that. There still was no football season when I went back for my senior year. They actually played in the spring. So it was like a whole year went by. But continued to do more football content the next spring and wanted to start exploring more opportunities for when I graduated. And that's when I kind of circled back and I was like, oh, these NFL guys, they're doing like literally what I'm doing, just on a
Mhm.
professional level. And found two of the guys here in Pittsburgh that were doing it, Mike Spinos and Alex Mowry, who are now my coworkers, and kind of followed along with their journeys and asked them questions when I could, and looked to them for advice. And then graduated, started to do more like more video projects around the community, not necessarily sports based, but anything from real estate to corporate to a lot of drone stuff, because that's really what got me started too. And then went back to my high school, which would have been fall 2022, I think, and filmed their football program because I was able to get a deal with like the boosters and everything. About September of 2022, I got a DM from Kim, who's one of my bosses at the NFL now, that they were looking for somebody in Pittsburgh, and my work had came up. And so I went and interviewed and got the gig. And that was kind of
Amazing.
my entry into professional sports. And then it snowballed from there.
Wow, that's awesome. You've been seeing me type. I'm not texting. I'm writing notes.
Oh, no, you're good.
So I appreciate you being so thorough with your answers, or with your description of your story. So when you get that DM in your mind, is this somewhat of a surprise to you? Like, oh, what a great opportunity. Or had you already in your mind said, I want to work for the NFL. Like that's my goal, for lack of a better term. or was it just a spontaneous opportunity that arose that you obviously have to say yes to?
So it was more detail like how it played out. There was a couple other occasions where I saw they were looking for people
Mhm.
through just like other Instagram stories and everything, and it was always like send a DM to this person or send your work to this person, all through Instagram. So I had done that like the year or two before that when I was like about to graduate, and just never heard anything back. Never even got seen to my knowledge or anything. Uh, so that was kind of a little discouraging, I'd say. And then that summer, there was another instance of like, hey, send your work here. We're hiring for this season. So I sent my stuff in. That was like in June or so. Never heard anything. And then out of nowhere got the DM in September.
Yeah.
So it was
Right.
it was a surprise because I kind of had written off, the season was already underway basically.
Yeah,
Um,
we have such a tendency to do that, and I mean, it's fair to think I haven't heard in a week, 2 weeks, 2 months,
mhm.
3 months, but I think we can forget that because you haven't heard. I know maybe it's not necessarily the nicest that people don't get back to you, but they're busy. You're not necessarily a priority, but you're still stowed away for later, right? Your
Yeah.
information is still on file. They know your skill level. They know that you have the credibility. Who knows what's going on their end, right? Maybe it's not the right time. So it's I so many times that's happened to me as well, where like you've written something off and then weeks, months later, you're like, oh, okay. So I was still
Yeah.
I was still a person of importance, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's easy to give up on it and just be like, oh, like I'm never gonna get, they're never gonna see this or whatever. And that's kind of what I did at that point. Is I was like, oh, it's whatever. I haven't heard
Mhm.
anything the last 2 years before this, so why would I hear it now?
Right.
And so it was surprising, and it was also like I got to take this opportunity because I knew that I wanted to do that in some capacity, just because I'd watched other LCCs and like what they do. And I liked that it was like a part time nature where it wasn't a full commitment, where I could still do my own stuff too.
Right. Right. And we'll get into what you do there in NFL Live, but I have some points I want to get through. Aaron, do you want a chance to jump in before I rifle off all my questions?
Yeah. Well, I think just a small point is like sometimes you get put on the back burner and it's important not to get down on yourself and quit or like pull the plug like, oh, they didn't like me. I'm not good enough. I'll never make it. I think a lot of people can go that direction. And I think it's important to kind of be like, and just keep going and like keep trying other things. And I mean, you emailed them or reached out twice in a row with your work. There's no shame in like, hey, maybe that timing wasn't right. Maybe I've improved in the last year. Like, keep trying and keep doing other things, and you just never know what's going to happen. That's the attitude that tends to win. Whether it was them coming back weeks later, or because they said no, you found this other venture and were successful in that. So just keep going. I think is important. Keep
Yeah.
trying to get better, learn from it.
It's a good point. Not waiting around, right? Not waiting around for an answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Love that.
exactly.
Patience
So-
and persistence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. So early in your description of your background, you used the phrase doubling down. You'd posted your golf course reel, I think initially, your drone reel or demo reel. And you said it got really good response. And you said, I want to double down on that. Not necessarily in this case exactly, but with what you've learned and moving forward, what does doubling down mean for you in a more nuanced sense?
I'd say doubling down for me is putting all your eggs in one basket almost, because that's kind of what it was there. Up till then, it was like a hobby, if you will. I was like, oh, like I don't think I could really make this a career. I'm just doing this for fun. And that was like the first glimpse of there might be something here. There's a lot of attention on this stuff right now, and
Mhm.
I enjoy doing it. It doesn't feel like working. So for me, when I double down on something, it's putting a lot more of my focus on it, a lot more of my effort, and kind of like burning the boats, if you will. And there's no going back. Once I commit, I commit.
Right. And that was before you were, a professional. Now that you are a professional, right, with a media company and you're working for NFL Live, do you still would that term still fit? Are there areas that you have success in? And I think a good keyword here is exploit. When something is working well for us, we want to continue to exploit that and improve upon it. And when things aren't working well, we explore and explore and explore, and we keep exploring until we find what works. And then we exploit. Does that kind of ring true to how you work now? Or do you still, to use your term, double down in certain areas? Now that you're at a lot different spot than you were when you first posted that video?
Yeah, absolutely. I getting more into like the business side whenever I started to have more time to do that after I graduated and everything. Initially, real estate was like a really appealing part because it was tied into the drones real heavy. You didn't have to deal with people necessarily all the time. You know, you're just you in the building and you just had
Right.
to go through and do stuff. So that was like, I saw that, I was like, oh, this is it. Like, I'm going to exploit this, like you said. And got into doing that and had more clients with that and realized that I hated it. And also realized I just didn't like it just seemed to attract a lot of people. I don't know if it was the real estate industry or not, that I just wasn't a fan of being around, I guess. And the work just kind of became like very repetitive and not really creative anymore.
Right.
So that was a situation where I kind of doubled down on it and really was pushing to make that a big segment of my business, and then kind of backfired. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I got to retreat and go explore different areas.
Right. I think another thing that's so important too is, and this is maybe oversimplistic, but I think it's important to state, is that it's important to make content we like and that other people like. If we care about getting business, getting quote likes, follows. You said early on when you were doing you made a warm-up highlight reel of the football team at your school, right? And I'm sure you were psyched on it. Otherwise you wouldn't have shared it. But the school also liked it. So when you have the audience liking it, your specific audience like it, and you love it, I think that's a good recipe for motivation to continue getting better and to keep exploiting, to use that term again, that genre, that area. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I think having number one, obviously you have to enjoy it. Like I said, I don't think in the creative world you can be successful if you don't enjoy what you're making, because it's not creative anymore. It's just, you're just checking the box to get it done.
Right.
So that's a huge part of it. And when you have the added bonus of like what you're doing is being recognized and you're getting support from your own community, or even just a paid client is giving you a lot of positive feedback. That's all. I mean, that's a recipe for success, because now you've got a product that you love doing. Other people love it, and you can really, exploit that. I know we keep using it, but
yeah,
it's a good term for it,
Yeah. I mean, there might not be anything worse in the photography world than making content you hate that other people love. Maybe that's just a personal thing.
Yeah.
Because we're all artists at heart, right? Like, we're creating something out of nothing, right?
And that's the Rick Rubin. The audience comes last if you're a true artist.
Yeah. Being selfish.
I like that.
And he brought up I love Rick Rubin. Just his voice, the sound of his voice is so soothing. But he brought up
who Rick Rubin is if they have no idea.
Rick Rubin's a producer. He's just been a part of so many iconic records and like pushing the envelope with a lot of ideas, bringing rap music and rock and roll music together back in I think it was the 80s. Just a lot of like different interesting things to try to create the most, I don't know, artistic and true pieces. But he talks about the creative process a lot. He has a couple of books that have come out recently. He's been on a few podcasts. Just a good mind. He's like a little Buddha, I think. But he talks about the audience being last, and he talks about the example he gives are like all these blockbuster movies that just get like spit out and churned out, where it's like, this is what the audience wants, this is what they like. And the movies are never, they might be entertaining, but they're never like that deep, like someone that makes a movie for years and like it's their baby, and if it does well, it does well, but that's not the point of it. The point is to like make something for them, you know? And I think that's true with photography, with even the littlest bit of content. You're making a reel. It's got to, like we talked about it before, Seth, like just completely copying something that went trendy because you want it to go trendy too, or viral too. And then, like, doesn't feel as great if it goes viral. It's like, oh, well, I just copy the thing.
I wouldn't know. I haven't gone viral, so.
You're not copying things. You need to copy more things.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think I think you come first, right? But the audience still is important, depending on what you're trying to do. Like, are you trying to grow? Are you trying to get business? Are you trying to, you know, those movies you referenced that just Hollywood churns out, they probably, you know, break records all the time because there's a formula, right? There's a formula.
Yeah, right. Right.
I think the magic spot is it being your baby, to use your term, right? It's your art, it's for you, and it's well received. We can figure out how to do that consistently. I think we're satisfied with ourselves as artists, and we also open up a lot of doors for ourselves in terms of getting hired or growth, etc.
Yeah, I think you could argue social media now though promotes to you make for the audience versus yourself though, unfortunately. At least in like a platform like Instagram and TikTok, it's very heavily like you got to play it into the algorithm.
Do you feel that way? Do you feel boxed in?
Oh yeah, sometimes.
Let's get into that. Yeah.
I mean, just taking it back to last year when I started doing the NFL stuff, I was starting to post similar videos to like what I did in college, which were more like hype style, longer edits, like a minute or so long. And they do all right with like my core followers, but like they weren't doing nearly as good as they were at Westminster. I'm like, uh-oh, I think we lost Seth.
Yeah, Seth bounced.
Oh, he's back.
He's right back. Perfect.
But they weren't doing nearly like what I expected. And so that was discouraging. I was like, what? Like I got all these pro players in it now, and like now people just don't interact with it or whatever. Fast forward to this past year, you know, I've made a lot shorter clips, kind of evolved to like the short form type of algorithm, and they've been a lot more successful. So I enjoy making those clips because they still are cool to, you know, edit and play with the colors and get the sounds synced up if there's something cool happening in the clip. But it's not quite probably what I actually want to do sometimes. So, but it's what I do for the gram.
For the gram. Do it for the gram. No, it's true. It's a different format, right? Like it's just a different, first of all, it's vertical. Like,
yeah,
like
that's a downside too.
that takes a minute and a while to get back to things. So we're already just being, you know, steered in a direction based on the format of Instagram, which is so different than any filmmaker has ever tried to do ever. You know, I'm scared of the day where the first movie comes out with a vertical TV, or the first vertical TV is put on the wall.
Yeah, that'll be dangerous.
That'll be dangerous, and it's gonna happen at some point. There will be an option to rotate your TV. I guarantee it. Sooner than later. Maybe it already exists. I don't know. But yeah, we're already stuck in that sort of. It has to be a 4x5 photo to have the best real estate. And you're cropping every photo, even if it doesn't fit. There's this one photo I have where it does not call for a 4x5 vertical photo. And I don't even know where the original is at this point because it's a long time ago, but it bugs me so much because I forced it and it was a landscape. Like it needed to be a landscape photo. And I printed it out even in the 4x5. Like that's all just being steered by the method of Instagram or whatever the platform you're using is. So it is interesting, but it's also a challenge. I don't know about you, but like I enjoy, like, how can I make an intriguing video in 9 seconds with like a hook, a theme, and like a ending? Like, how can I get the point across in 9 seconds? That's kind of a challenge too. So, I mean, there's fun ways to look at it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and how can you, there's so many different variables within that 9 seconds, right?
Yeah.
How can I, what's my hook? How do I retain attention? How do I make people maintain focus all the way to the end? Sometimes videos don't call for that, right? I mean, I see what you're saying. The challenge is fun. The challenge, can be fun. Maybe it's more fun to others, to certain individuals, right? I'm trying to find a way to make that fun, because to me, that's not fun. But I've done a lot of other things in my life that weren't fun, and I just tried to figure out a way to how to do them, and now they are fun. So I've figured to myself, if I really want to care about social media, I mean, there's a way to make it satisfying, or to enjoy being brutal at it.
I think too, and I was talking to a few YouTube creators. I think the long form is making a comeback too in like the YouTube space. So there is a mix. I think of like
Right.
I don't know how to say his last name, but Martin Deward, I want to say, but I could be wrong. He has like hour-long videos that are so slow, but amazingly shot. And he's just building his cabin with his bare hands. There's hardly any talking. It's just cinematic and like the most peaceful thing ever. I
It sounds
love
like I could go
watching
to
those.
sleep to that. It sounds like an insomnia
I
medication.
might have seen either him or something like that.
But it's like it's done so well, and you're like, oh, this, like, it still works. It's still what we enjoy to see, and he has tons and tons of followers and engagement and what have you. But there's nothing quick, 9 seconds, funny, like, here's someone that got hit in the balls. Like, okay, like
Right.
how many times can we see that go millions viral while we're putting in so much work to have like a cinematic 14 seconds, and you're like, it just flops, and you're like, well. Okay, wrong audience, I suppose,
Yeah.
but there is a place for everything, and if it is your own art and like that's what you really want to do, you can put it on YouTube. You can, I don't know what the length is, like a limit, but you can put on some long art. We put our podcast on there. You can put on some long videos on YouTube,
Right.
if you want to. It'll be 4 hours probably. So,
Well, since we're talking about content, I hope I'm right in assuming you're somewhat able to talk about this, Josh. You did work with, it's Peter's Pasta, right?
Yeah.
You guys did a collaboration with Mr. Beast, right? And you were videoing the thing for Peter, or is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So what can you kind of tell us about that? Maybe some things you learned about videography, about, as far as I understand, you guys saw some pretty cool creative studios.
Yeah.
You're in that environment that was content 24/7 daily. What are some things you picked up? Either from the Mr. Beast team, your own team, just some things you observed, and maybe run us through what you're allowed to talk about. I don't know what you are and are not allowed to, speak about that project, but kind of how that came to be as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was my first experience with, like you said, content 24/7, like a content machine,
Right.
basically like a YouTuber that's fully scaled, like everything that
He's the
there's
biggest
possible
creator in
to
the
scale.
world, right? Mr. Beast.
What's that?
He has the most subscribers of anybody on YouTube, Mr. Beast, correct?
Yeah, I think he's at like 200 million or something now,
Insane.
which is, it's up there. There might be like one channel in India or something that like reposts videos that might be up there, but he's like the
Right.
number one pretty much.
We're talking like warehouses for studios, right?
Yeah. So I mean the one, we were in a warehouse that was like called like Studio B or something, and it was like their short form warehouse.
Mhm.
And it was pretty big. I don't know the exact specs, but it was very sizable. You could fit multiple trucks inside if you wanted to.
Wow.
So there was like a whole warehouse space with they had different sets built on for short form videos. And then there was like an actual office space attached to it. And then it was sitting on like this huge property that they use for outside shoots and everything. So that alone was pretty sweet. And then there was a second studio that we didn't get to see the inside of, but I mean, massive, like Amazon warehouse size. It's actually, they told us will be the biggest soundstage on the East Coast. I
Wow.
believe starting this year, because they just did an expansion. But really big, and that's where he shoots his long form videos at. And they were shooting a video while we were there, so we weren't able to see the inside just because they had it, confidential and everything. But so yeah, the whole experience from top to bottom was crazy, just because the scale of it. Having just a site dedicated just for short form videos was crazy, because I mean there was probably 8 to 10 people that worked there full time. Their jobs were just to plan and create the logistics behind his TikToks and Instagram reels and YouTube shorts, and that was it. The sets they had built where you go in and you open the refrigerator and it's just $100 bills stacked inside. They had the Feastables chocolate bars everywhere. So that was a big takeaway, was just the sheer scale of like an operation like Mr. Beast. Obviously how it kind of came to fruition. So Ryan Peters Pasta, he's based here in Pittsburgh, and he started a series last spring or last January, so a little over a year ago, where he was like, I'm gonna create pasta from an egg, but the eggs are gonna double every time. So he started day 1 with 1 egg yolk, day 2 doubled. By April, which is when I first did my first video with him, he was at 4,000 eggs, which was for like day 11 or day 12 or something like that. So these were all short form videos he was making. It was going on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels. So once he got to like the 4,000 number, it was clear that he needed to do like a behind the scenes vlog style thing of this, because it was the operation was becoming like a multi-day thing. So that's where I came in and filmed the whole process for 4,000 eggs. So I went and filmed
that was your payment, 4,000 eggs.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I got coupons for free eggs for days for the whole summer. Gave all my friends and family and everything. But
nice.
So we did that video in April, and around that time when we were filming that video, we were obviously talking about, okay, well, now it doubles to 8,000. And that's when he was like, yeah, like I've been talking to the Mr. Beast team and like they want to collaborate, I think. And we were like, what? Like that, how big that would be. So I was like, I'm on board. Like, let's do it whenever you want to do it. If he hits you up, like I'm down. So the 4,000 egg video is done. We post that, like 2 months goes by. It's June, and he gives me a call and he's like, hey, like, could you come down next week to North Carolina? We're going to do the video. So that's when the planning process started. It worked out that I was at a wedding in Arkansas for my cousin the weekend that we were supposed to start filming there. So it worked. He found somebody else to film those first 2 days. And then I flew in like on Sunday night to like cover the rest. And we were there till Friday, I think, anyway. So I pull up and I walk in and I meet Ian. Is like the first person I meet. And I thought
Ian
he worked.
Jones? Yep.
Yeah, Ian Jones. I thought he worked for Mr. Beast, because he was giving me a tour of the whole factory and he's showing me the drawers in the kitchen. He's like, yeah, you can just help yourself if you want a snack or anything. I'm like, oh, sweet. Like, so I thought he actually worked for them. And then I put it together that he was Ian and he was the photographer, and it made sense. But so yeah, then we spent the next 3 or 4 days grinding out the rest of that video, and having some fun in the process. I mean, they were long days. Wake up and we were there till 10 or 11 o'clock at night most nights, and then we'd go enjoy ourselves at the hotel bar after that. But it was a good time, and I learned a lot about what's possible with social media. And also just like some of the logistics of like organizing something like that. And it was a cool experience. It was crazy.
Right. So what were your biggest takeaways in terms of learning? I mean, was it fun to live, breathe, eat, sleep content all day?
I don't know. I would say, just to answer that question, I don't know if I'd want to eat, live, breathe content 24/7 like that. Cause it's at a point where for him where it's just, that's all he does. And he almost, it seemed as if he was just kind of told where to go. And like he had his whole team that was planning everything out, and he was just kind of like the prop almost at this point.
Right.
That's what allowed him to scale to this point. So not that there's anything wrong with that,
Mhm.
but I wouldn't want to do that. So I'd say my biggest takeaway is don't sleep on social media, because the amount you can scale and the amount of revenue that can be involved, and um, understanding what it means to have videos, especially long form videos that get 1 to 10 million views or more. Perfect example being like the Super Bowl last night, north of 200 million viewers, and how much those ads cost, and then how much that's worth for a YouTube. If you have a brand that's looking to make a deal with like a YouTuber that consistently gets views, and
Right.
that brand has like a lot of influence with their audience type stuff. So I'd say that was the number one thing I learned. Two, we learned the value of teamwork and being able to like sort through problems and disagreements and everything, just because a lot of moving pieces with that project, and it didn't go entirely smoothly at all times, but we made it work in the end. So I'd say those are the two biggest things. And number three, I mean, it just helped me learn a lot of, I hadn't done like, let me see how I want to describe this. For YouTube, you have to kind of edit for retention almost, where it's very like specific editing, kind of copying in some ways, in terms of like there's certain people that do it really well, and so people try to mimic it. So there was a lot of pressure on that video, because it was Mr. Beast, it was the 10,000 eggs.
Mhm.
It needed to do well. So I really had to try to figure out how to put it together, even though I didn't have a ton of experience doing like viral YouTube videos at that point.
Right.
So I learned a lot through that, and the video did end up getting 1 million views, so it worked out. But
Awesome, man.
it worked out in the end. But I remember the first like week or so, it only had or the first day or two, it only got like 20,000 views. And I was like, oh shit. Like, but we pulled it out.
Yeah, back to that
amazing.
same theme of not writing things off too soon, right?
Mhm.
Speaking about retention, you said you had to edit for retention. I think retention is an important thing, even in the short form content world. It's crazy I'm even saying this, but you got a 10-second video, you want people to make it past 5 seconds, right? If you care about that kind of stuff.
5's pretty good, I think.
Right. You mentioned there's some creators who do it really well. If you wouldn't mind maybe sharing a couple, if you know their usernames. And what do you think helps retain attention in any kind of video? Cuts, pacing, etc.
So I'd say, if you were to talk to me back over the summer, what I would say played for retention, it was like quick cuts, having sound effects, the memes, like very like the short form attention span stuff that's crept into long form videos. Now I think it's going more the direction of a little bit of that stuff, but it's more the story. If you're not telling a story with the long form videos, it just doesn't seem to get picked up, and people aren't going to be engaged. So I'd say storytelling is probably number one now. As long as you have a good story, people will overlook the fact of like bad audio or bad video
Right.
quality even. So it's not even necessarily you have to like nail the video quality, nail the audio, the lighting and all that stuff. Like you have to have a really good story. And so that's something I'm planning to continue to work on this year and get better at, and be able to edit better with that situation. You look at like YouTubers, obviously Mr. Beast is probably the number one in terms of retention, and he has a very distinct way that he edits videos. His team edits videos. They're more for like the short form mind of lots of things happening, lots of stimulation. They tell a story. There's cuts all over the place, camera angles all over the place, things popping up on the screen, sound effects. Plus they're doing crazy stuff on the video.
Right.
But you look at like a YouTuber like MKBHD, who does, tech reviews and stuff like that, and his videos are not flashy at all in terms of like quick cuts and stuff like that. They look really good. They sound really good. And he also is really entertaining with the way he tells a story. So I'd say that's like MKBHD, that's kind of like the style of YouTuber that I watch more often. But I've started to kind of branch out and watch others. Another example, there's another Pittsburgh YouTuber named John Malaki, who does woodworking. And he'll build these crazy tables with the epoxy fillings in them and water. They have like look like they have waterfalls and stuff going through them. And his videos can be 30, 40 minutes long, and you'll get sucked into them like it's a TV show. And they kind of have a good mix of that high energy editing, but also they tell a story of watching this build from start to finish. Even up to the point where they deliver it to the customer's house or whatever.
It just goes to show that.
Sorry, Seth, I have a follow-up question to the
Yeah,
woodworking. I'm always amazed. I mentioned Martin again. I don't know his last name, but he's filming. I guess I don't know this, but it has the feel of he's setting up a tripod, he's filming, kind of like Man vs. Wild, or like those shows would always fascinate me. Like, you're going to survive in the wild, but you're also setting up the tripod so you can go walk by it like you're hiking. Like it's so much extra work when you're already doing something. So like someone that's woodworking, do you feel like there's a whole crew there, or is it all the artistic sort of direction of the person? I mean, I don't know his story, so I'm just curious about that. In terms of like someone else is telling the art, His
story, he started out kind of with the method of set up a tripod and do it myself, or do it himself. And that's what he did for like the first 4 or 5 years. And that led to him, first of all, he's in the unique position to where he has an actual business with it, where he's selling these to customers and bigger clients, because he's making conference tables and stuff like that. So he has the actual business, and he could kind of just like vlog it as well. But then the YouTube side started to take off. So now he has a full-time videographer and like 2 social media people and an editor that he uses. So he doesn't necessarily do all the filming now. He will from time to time. So that helps big time in an occupation like that. So he can just focus on, building the products, and somebody else worries about the creative side. But you can see success with YouTubers who are a one-man band and they just set up a tripod.
Yeah.
They'll walk up the trail, set the tripod up, walk back down, then walk up to get the shot. You have to do what you got to do, but it works.
Yeah. It's amazing. Like, it's amazing the motor some people have. And it's just like a clear differentiator, like between someone that's like, oh, I have a good woodworking business and that's it, versus the person that's like, I have this, and I'm going to also do all this, the secondary complete business of putting it onto screen, like making a story, editing. All 3 of us here have done video editing. It's not like an easy chore, especially if you're starting off. And you said 4 to 5 years of doing the woodworking, building that business, and now I have to go edit all the stuff that I just did and like put it all together like that. That's an incredible motor that I don't think many have. And I'm not surprised anymore when people make it and you hear their backstory. You're like, oh, like you have this drive that many don't,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think going back to the takeaways, that kind of spurred my third takeaway, was that the people that are successful on the YouTube endeavor, and even just the social media side, they have to have that drive, like you said, because it's a 24/7 operation. You're always kind of clocked in and thinking of ideas, creating, filming, editing, strategizing. So you really can't cut corners. And that's what I've learned in the last year or two, especially on the YouTube side, is you have to put some real planning into it. You have to have a lot of patience, a lot of confidence, and you can't get discouraged either.
Now, do you think quality or quantity is more important? So, in other words, would you rather spend 4 months working on, in your opinion, this is going to be the greatest video I've ever made, right? It's perfect in every way. Or would you rather get 10 videos that are pretty good out in that same time?
That's a tough one.
It's a personal question. This is opinion.
Yeah. I think quality over quantity. I think you get to the point where you can put out as many quality videos as you can is probably the best thing I would say. But you can't cut corners and just put them out to put them out. Because there has to be the story there. Like I said, if you have really good video quality and very good audio quality, and the lighting's nailed and the focus is nailed and everything, like that stuff matters as well. Not as much, but still, if you're creative, like that stuff matters to you as well, and a lot of the audience members who might be watching. So I'd say I'm quality over quantity, but there's a time and a place for it.
Yeah, I mean, and then I guess to follow up, do you feel that if someone favors quantity, right, puts more of an importance on quantity, and they're just blasting out videos, maybe a lot of them are mediocre, do you think that's harmful to their, I don't want to say personal brand, but to how their audience receives them in the future? Or do you think people just, whatever, people only count your wins, like, oh, that was great, and kind of tend to forget your blunders?
Yeah, I think it does shape your audience. It attracts a different audience member if you're putting out quality videos versus if you're putting out just quality or quantity. Because what I've found is that creators that are very short form focused, it doesn't usually convert well to long form videos, no matter what the quality is, just because they've attracted an audience that wants action within 2 or 3 seconds. They're so used to watching a 7 or 8 second video, then scrolling to the next, instant gratification, versus an audience, if you're putting out 1 or 2 videos a month, that's watching a full 30 or 40-minute video, is a lot different. And it could be different age, can be different interests, different backgrounds in their career. So I'd say they're definitely different.
Do you feel there's more value to the latter, having an audience member who will stick around for that 40-minute video, even if they're less in numbers than the swipe, give me 9-second video crew?
I'd say they're more valuable, yeah, because just looking at it from the monetary side of, if I was a brand and I wanted to sponsor somebody, I'd want their audience to be more attentive and to care more. Usually if they're watching a video longer, they're going to care more, and they're more likely to buy into whatever product I'm advertising, or just pay attention to, if you're a creator and you launch a store or something, to sell a product, stuff like that, they're more likely to participate than if you're just scrolling through. You really don't matter as much to them, because they can scroll one down and there's somebody else that's just as important.
I guess that speaks to the idea of the more time someone or your audience has invested in you, I think the more, obviously, the more they care. I think that's a simple, people might be saying, well, duh. But it's sometimes valuable to say the simplest concepts out loud. I'm a believer in that. But so, I guess this speaks to, going back to the word retention, that word is important beyond social media. Even if you're listening and you don't care about social media at all, but you want to make money commercially with your camera. I mean, retention matters if you're creating an ad. Retention matters if you're creating, something for a brand, right? So, as somebody who does a lot of this with Orchard 8, right, your media company, what do you think most people who want to be creators for companies, what do they get wrong about the business side of being that kind of creator? I'm not saying you know all the answers, but just in your opinion, maybe some things that you got wrong even.
Yeah, I'd say one of the things I definitely got wrong going into it was that businesses will like the same style and like the same idea of video that I'm trying to make. Because there's a lot that already have an idea of what they want in their mind. So they may not like what your idea is. They may not like what the final result is. And you can't get angry about it necessarily, because they have different interests. And it also ties into what is their audience. You have to understand what who their audience is, what they want to see, why are they buying their product or using their service, what age is their audience, what stage of life are they in. There's a lot more pertains to it than just going in and making a flashy video or just making a video and calling it a day. There's got to be a lot of strategy behind it. And when I first started out, it was just kind of like, oh, I'm getting paid to make videos now. And you look over that and you may not have delivered as good of a quality video as you could have, or the brand might not be as happy as you want them to be.
Right. Or you wrongfully assume they're hiring me because they want my style, my creative vision, my ideas. Yes. I think that's an easy mistake to make. Whereas it's more likely they're hiring, hopefully on your website or whatever you're using as your portfolio, you've shown that you have the ability to be diverse, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on that topic, how are you wedging the door open with prospects?
So a lot of how it worked for me was it started out with like word of mouth. I mean, that's really how it is.
It's the best form of marketing, in my opinion. When somebody personally endorses you, you know, you can't
exactly.
Beat that.
Yeah, you do those.
What anyone says
you do those first couple projects, and then usually a word of mouth lead is just it's really strong because if their buddies, using you and they recommend you, they're probably going to be willing to at least learn more about what you offer. So that was kind of how it started. But then you get into the cycle of like the feast and famine cycle, where it's like you'll be real busy for a month or two. And then since you're so busy, you don't organize anything else for like the next 2 or 3 months. So then you get in there and there's no work. It's dried up and you're like, oh man, like what's going on? So that's where some of the DMing and cold outreach and the networking side comes in, and the patient side, where I've kind of started to try to develop a strategy to remember when I am busy, to look ahead for those next 3 or 4 months, to plan things out and reach out, send cold emails, and then during the slow months to not panic and just remember that the business will come. You just have to put in the work and reach out. And even another thing I try to remind myself too is when cold DMing or cold emailing, even if you get a no or they don't respond or anything, similar to how we talked about earlier, like don't count yourself out. Sometimes just because you emailed them, and then a year later they're like, oh, we need a video person now. I've had several instances where people follow up a year or so later or 6 months later, and it then turns into something. So you can't write it off right away. But you do have to put yourself out there. And for me, as like an introverted personality, especially going into it, it was not something I wanted to do and still don't love to do, but I have to do it to survive.
Right. Yeah. What's with you introverted people? Aaron's an introvert too, and you guys are on podcasts. What's the deal with that?
Hey, I don't know. I would have never imagined I'd be doing this.
Tell us about the podcast you started, MVP podcast, correct?
Yep.
Why? That's all I'm going to say. Why did you start one? What's the goal?
So I was already out of school, but 2 of my buddies that I met in an entrepreneurship class in school, we were just one day, we're like, we should do something together. We're all like-minded and hungry. And so we're like, let's do a podcast. And this was spring 2021. And it seemed like a very simple thing to start, in terms of we could start with just like our iPhone microphone and set it on a table and just start having a conversation like we normally would, but we just post it after. So we put our last names together, Mullen, Veon, Popa, and came up with MVP podcast.
Well, that was easy for you guys.
Yeah.
Right. So it worked out. So we did that, and we interviewed our professor for our entrepreneurship class, where we all kind of like came together. We interviewed him for like our second episode and picked his brain about his experience and everything. And our idea was to bring on MVPs of their industry, people that we thought were doing really cool things, successful, that had a lot of insight into what it took to get there. So it was business focused, athlete focused, just people that are just crushing it,
Right.
And so usually we try to have on a guest or two. targeting mainly around the Pittsburgh area. Occasionally people that still have ties back to here, but they may have moved on to other portions of the country. We bring them on, and much like you guys, we just kind of go through their story and ask questions and talk about the current events.
Right on, man. Right on.
Very
Well,
cool.
we're going to wrap up soon, but I'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit more or close out with NFL Live.
Oh yeah.
You know, that's most of what your
yeah.
social presence is, right? Your personal page. You know, I got caught in the death scroll watching, 120 frame per second video after 120 frame per second video. I'm not saying that's all you do, but that's just with sports. When you see like a touchdown or something in that slow-mo, it's just kind of, you can obsess over it. Anyways, you make great stuff. Hence why we're here. So you
Thank
said
you.
you had three, I think you said you had three buddies who were working there, and you were kind of in their ear, and that helped you get to where you were, or get to NFL Live, among, as well as your skill set. So what do you do there? What are your tasks? What are you paid to do? What do you like the most about it? And to give you even more questions, what are some of the challenges?
I love it. Yeah, so I'm part of the NFL Live content correspondent team, and basically we're an arm of the NFL social team. The team was brought together in like 2018 or so to bring fans as close as possible to the action. That was when that's when Reels and TikToks and Snapchat's actually what they started on, really started to become big with their stories and all that stuff. So the TV broadcast really wasn't cutting it for that. And so they saw an opportunity to have people down there with their cameras, their DSLRs and everything. And they would send in the content back to the league, and then they could distribute it to wherever. So that's what our goal is today. Still, there's 3 of us in every NFL city, and we help the home and the away teams capture content. All of the content goes back to the league as well, and then any major brand partners too, such as like a Nike or something like that.
That's
so
awesome. Yeah,
day to day, we get between the lines access on the field, pregame and postgame, and then during the game, obviously we're down there, and our job is to basically get as close as we can to the players without interfering, and get cool content that the fans would like. Social first content. And one of the things that was unique to this year is they came out and they said they want us to prioritize iPhone content.
Wow.
So that was their number one. And that made a lot of people upset initially, but I think we all learned to like it, at least most of us, as the year went on. So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of games now where I'm just out there with this and shooting.
It's amazing. I mean,
and
it's
you get a lot of weird
right?
looks.
It's relatable. Like most people have an iPhone or an Android in their pocket. Like I've known some fans where they want iPhone photos, like no filters, no editing, none of that done. You know?
Yeah. The whole reason behind it was they track everything from each season just to see how it performs. And the iPhone content that we did last year outperformed everything else by like 100% or something crazy.
So sell like your 25%. Cameras, everyone. You don't need them.
No. So it started off like real hard as like, all right, phones only the first couple games.
Yeah.
And then it was like, all right, let's relax this a bit. Mount your phone to the side of the camera. So now usually we'll have our phone mounted to the side, and then my camera in my A7S III is with the 7200, and I'll use that for some closer imagery. But that's been different. I've grown to like it. The iPhone cameras are getting pretty insane nowadays. But as far as challenges with the job, staying out of the way is a challenge sometimes, because there's a lot of restrictions in terms of you can go here, but you can't go there. So there's always rules depending on what stadium you're in, where you can go. Players are moving quick, so like you always see the videos of people getting blasted on the sidelines by players. So you got to be ready to go to move. That's one of the pros of using the iPhone. Actually, is you're able to just move wherever real easily.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. So that's a big challenge. I feel like another challenge that was unearthed this year was if you're using the phones, you may get some crap from some of the other photographers, because they're like, "What are you doing down here with your phone?" type thing. And
right, yeah,
had a few. I think we all had a few run-ins of like people kind of being like, "Who's this guy?" So you just kind of gotta stay cool, do your job, and just be happy.
You're like, I get it, man. They told me I have to.
Right, I'm like, it's literally our job.
know.
Like, I'd rather have my phone or my camera.
It's a thing
too,
we do. We have to use our phone. I know.
Right. Let's see. What else is a challenge? Well, I'd say a big challenge too is just like it's kind of the luck of the draw sometimes if you're in a good spot for a play. Especially with football. Like a lot of times you'll be on the complete opposite end zone, and if they go on that side, you're not really getting anything that's useful. You can get a cool side angle maybe, but it's just with the way those stadiums work, they need to be coming like at you or
right,
to your corner. So positioning yourself, being in the right place at the right time. There was several occasions this year where I was in a sweet spot and I was like, I'm going to go over here just to, try. And as soon as I left, then something crazy happened at the sweet spot.
Yep.
Or I'd be on the complete opposite side of the field. And, that happens a lot too. So you just gotta feel it out and use your best judgment.
Yep. That's wildlife. Pick a spot. Don't move around.
But put yourself in the best spot to succeed, and maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't.
Maybe it doesn't.
Well, Josh, thanks so much for your time today, man. People can find your podcast, MVP Podcast. Is that all they need to search? We'll put a link in the episode description if people are interested in that. Your media company is Orchard.
Podcast.
Yeah, in Orchard 8 Media, also in the episode description, as well as your handle. So appreciate your time today, man. Hopefully we get to meet someday. Hopefully get down to Pittsburgh. I'll meet Ian at some point, I'm sure, and I'll reach out to you. Maybe say hello. So again, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.